In the cold night of a small gas station, where dim lights reflected on the wet pavement, an unexpected encounter with Barron Trump forever changed the life of a single mother and her young daughter. Let's listen to this story to gain more wonderful and meaningful lessons in life. At the same time, let us know where you are listening from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel to hear more. Drizzle-blanketed Cedarville, droplets slipping through the awning and clinging to the cold, desolate night. The old gas station, its flickering neon lights barely piercing the darkness, stood alone. Emily bent over a windshield, her rough hands trembling as cold gusts of wind swept through. Tugging her worn coat tighter, she found little relief from the biting chill. The weight of her pregnancy made every step heavier, and the ache in her back forced her to grit her teeth to keep moving. A few meters away, Madison, her young daughter, huddled on a faded plastic chair. An oversized sweater hung loosely over her small frame, offering minimal warmth. Madison shivered occasionally but remained focused on her old notebook, its damp pages speckled with raindrops. Gripping a short red pencil worn nearly to its stub, she sketched hurriedly. A cozy kitchen slowly emerged, a warm stove, a table laden with food, and imagined laughter filling the space. "Madison, are you cold?" Emily asked hoarsely, her voice weary with exhaustion and concern. Madison glanced up, her large eyes shadowed by faint dark circles. "I'm fine, Mom," she replied softly, offering a weak smile. Emily sighed and turned away, her chest tightening. Madison was trying to be strong, just as Emily had taught herself to be. Mounting expenses, rent, groceries, and preparations for the baby pressed heavily on her. But she had no choice. "Just a little longer," she murmured to herself. An engine broke the silence. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly into the station. Its bright headlights made Madison squint, while Emily straightened her posture, adjusting her coat and forcing a faint, practiced smile. The window rolled down, revealing Barron Trump. His face, illuminated by the station's dim light, was youthful yet serious, with eyes that seemed to see everything. Emily hesitated, vaguely recognizing him but unsure. Her voice trembled slightly. "Good evening. Would you like a full tank?" He nodded. "Yes, please." Emily began her task, but felt his gaze linger. He glanced at Madison, who continued sketching, her small shoulders hunched against the cold. Her hands gripped the pencil tightly, her strokes deliberate and filled with determination. "Does she like to draw?" he asked, his deep voice breaking the stillness. Emily paused, glancing back cautiously. "Yes, she loves drawing," she said softly. "It's how she dreams. She draws what she wants but doesn't have." His gaze lowered to Madison's notebook. The drawing of a modest kitchen, a warm stove, a table set with simple dishes rendered him silent. He saw more than a child's whimsy. It reflected the hardships Emily and Madison endured. Madison noticed his interest and looked up. "Do you like drawing too?" she asked, her voice quiet but curious. He smiled faintly, crouching to her level. "Not really, but I like seeing what others create. What are you working on?" Madison flipped to a new page, pointing at her sketch. "This is the restaurant my mom will open. There'll be bread, roast meat, and a big table for everyone to sit together." He studied the drawing, emotions stirring. A simple yet profound dream, like a faint light in the darkness. Emily stood a few steps away, trying to hide her unease, though his thoughtful gaze seemed to pierce through everything she had buried. "A beautiful dream," he said, handing the notebook back to Madison. "One day, your mom will make it come true." Madison smiled brightly, and Emily, standing silently in the drizzle, felt something stir within her, a flicker of light in her long, dark night. That fleeting moment, she realized, could be the beginning of something new. The pale morning sunlight in Cedarville offered little warmth after the rainy night. Emily stood behind the gas station counter, rubbing her hands for warmth as she occasionally glanced at the old clock on the wall. Nearby, Madison sat on a plastic chair, clutching her sketchbook and sketching with her short, worn red pencil. The sound of an engine broke the silence. Emily's eyes flickered with surprise as the sleek black SUV from the previous night pulled into the station. Trying not to overthink, she approached the car as the window rolled down, revealing Barron Trump's familiar face and reassuring smile. "Good morning," he greeted steadily. "Good morning. What can I get for you today?" she replied. "A full tank, like yesterday," he said, before glancing at Madison. "What's your daughter drawing?" Emily hesitated, recalling how his gaze had lingered on Madison's sketch the night before. "She's still drawing what she dreams about," she said, with a faint smile. Barron turned to Madison, his tone softening. "What are you drawing today?" Startled but curious, Madison held out her sketchbook. "A kitchen, but it's bigger than yesterday. There's space for everyone here." Barron studied the drawing, noticing added details like floral curtains and an oven. The simplicity of her work carried a heartfelt longing. Emily, finishing the gas cap, approached cautiously. "I don't know why this interests you, but it's not necessary." "Not necessary?" he interrupted, his gaze still on the drawing. Emily instinctively tugged her coat tighter around her pregnant belly. "We're fine. My daughter just dreams a little too big." "Too big?" he echoed, firm yet gentle. "I don't think so. Dreams like these are important." Madison looked at her mother, wide-eyed with curiosity. Emily avoided his gaze, clasping her hands tightly. Returning the sketchbook to Madison, Barron turned to Emily. "Don't you think you deserve something better?" Emily froze, unease flashing in her eyes. "You don't know us," she murmured. "Maybe not, but I do know everyone has the right to dream," he replied with a small shrug. Madison suddenly asked, "Do you have dreams, sir?" Barron smiled faintly. "Of course. Everyone has dreams." "What's your dream?" Madison asked, her voice tinged with wonder. "To help others make their dreams come true," he answered gently. For a moment, Emily felt like he wasn't just talking to Madison, but to her. His belief in her, something she hadn't felt in years, stirred something deep within. "Miss Emily," he said, his voice both kind and resolute, "if someone gave you the chance to change, would you take it?" Emily stood silently, her thoughts swirling as a spark of hope began to ignite. "Just think about it," Barron said, stepping back into his car. "I'll be back." As the SUV disappeared, Emily remained rooted in place, the weight of his words lingering. His presence had left a mark, one she couldn't ignore. The next morning, soft sunlight streamed across the wet pavement outside the gas station, still shimmering from the night's rain. Emily stood behind the counter, rearranging shelves, but her eyes kept drifting toward Madison. The little girl sat in her usual chair, not drawing but coloring old sketches with nearly worn-down pencils. Although Emily's mind was preoccupied with looming bills, she couldn't shake thoughts of the man from last night and his promise to return. A loud engine broke the quiet. Emily looked up, instinctively stepping outside as the black SUV rolled in and parked in the same spot. Barron stepped out holding 2 large paper bags. He spotted Emily, smiled, and then turned his attention to Madison. "Good morning," he greeted warmly, his voice steady and calm. "Where's Madison?" "She's over there," Emily replied cautiously. Madison looked up, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him. Barron walked over, setting the bags on the ground before kneeling to her level. "I brought this for you," he said, pulling out a brand new box of colored pencils, bright and neatly arranged. Madison hesitated, gently touching the box as if it might vanish. "Is this really for me?" she whispered. "It's yours," Barron replied, smiling encouragingly. "You can draw anything you want with them." Madison hugged the box tightly, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Thank you," she exclaimed, a mix of excitement and shyness in her voice. Emily stood silently observing. Part of her wanted to intervene. Accepting help from strangers felt foreign. But seeing Madison's rare smile stopped her. Barron stood and picked up the second bag, handing it to Emily. "This is for you," he said gently. I can't accept this," Emily said, taking a small step back. "Don't rush to refuse," Barron said, pulling a colorful flyer from the bag. "It's a free cooking course in New Haven. You should consider it." Emily took the flyer, scanning the words. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling with suspicion and emotion. "You don't even know me. We have nothing to offer you." Barron's gaze remained steady. "I don't need anything, Emily. Sometimes people just deserve a chance." Emily tightened her grip on the flyer, her eyes lowering. I don't know. Just think about it," Barron said calmly. "You don't have to decide now." Madison, still clutching her pencil box, looked up. "Mum, you should go. You'll make even better food, right?" Emily smiled faintly, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I'll think about it, sweetheart." Barron watched them, a light smile on his face. Without another word, he nodded in farewell and turned to leave. As he opened the car door, he said, "I'll be back. Remember, your dream isn't as far away as you think." Emily stood still, watching the SUV disappear. The flyer in her hands felt heavier with each passing moment, but alongside it was a faint glimmer of hope, vague but undeniably real. The morning air in New Haven carried a distinct energy. Tall red brick buildings lined the street, silently observing the bustling flow of people. Emily stood outside the community center, gripping the strap of her old cloth bag tightly. Inside were a few basic items the instructor had asked her to bring. For the first time in years, she felt like she was stepping into a place where she didn't quite belong. The glass door opened with a soft chime, releasing the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and butter. Inside, a group of women chatted animatedly, their clean aprons tied neatly. Emily hesitated briefly, taking a deep breath before crossing the threshold. "Good morning, you must be the new student," a cheerful voice called out. An older woman with a wide smile approached, extending a friendly hand. "I'm Mrs. Carla, the instructor for this class." Emily nodded, trying to smile. "Yes, I'm Emily. This is my first time here. Don't worry, we all started somewhere," Mrs. Carla said kindly. "Let me show you where to put your things." Following Mrs. Carla inside, Emily took in the spotless countertops and neatly arranged utensils. Everything felt foreign. Her mind drifted to the small kitchen in her old apartment, dented pots and an unreliable gas stove that sputtered with each use. The stark contrast was overwhelming. "Today we'll start with something simple, carrot cream soup," Mrs. Carla said, holding up a bright carrot. "It looks easy, but requires patience and finesse to perfect the flavor." Standing at her station, Emily brushed her hand over the pristine new knife. Around her, other students had already started peeling carrots and preparing ingredients. The rhythmic sound of knives and chopping boards filled the room. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the knife, carefully peeling the carrot skin in slow, deliberate strokes. "Are you okay, Emily?" Mrs. Carla asked gently. Emily nodded without looking up. I'm just not used to these tools yet. That's perfectly fine. Take your time. This is the place to learn, Mrs. Carla reassured her with a warm smile before moving on to assist another student. As the lesson progressed, Emily's hands began to steady. Her movements grew more confident and the carrots she sliced became neater and more uniform. When she poured the broth into the pot, the aroma filled the room, making her pause to inhale deeply. A moment of peace she hadn't felt in years. All right, everyone. The best part. Tasting your dish, Mrs. Carla announced. Emily ladled a small spoonful of soup, hesitating slightly before tasting it. The gentle sweetness of the carrot, creamy richness, and fragrant spices unfolded on her palate. She stared at the bowl, a comforting sense of accomplishment washing over her, a small but meaningful victory. That's fantastic, Emily, a fellow student commented as she passed by. Is this really your first time making this? Emily looked up, startled by the compliment. Yes, it is. Keep it up. You're going to do great. The woman smiled and returned to her station. Leaving the class, Emily carried a small container of soup, the portion she had cooked. She placed it carefully in her bag, feeling as though she wasn't just taking home food, but a tiny spark of light within herself. She thought of Madison and how excited the little girl would be to taste it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily sensed she was finally on the right path, though the road ahead remained long. The morning mist lingered in Cedarville, with the sunlight barely piercing through to warm the chill in the air. Emily stepped out of her modest apartment, her cloth bag swaying gently at her side. Inside were a few essentials she needed for her day at the community center. Madison walked beside her, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. She chattered excitedly about a new drawing, her bright eyes sparkling, while Emily kept her focus on their steady steps, ensuring they moved safely together. What do you think I should draw today, Mom? Madison asked, tilting her head with curiosity. Emily paused for a moment, then offered a soft smile. Maybe something bigger, a place you'd love to be. Madison nodded thoughtfully and fell silent as they continued their walk, each step deliberate, as though savoring a rare moment of calm. Arriving at the community center, Emily sensed something unusual. Mrs. Carla stood by the entrance, but her usual warm smile carried a hint of secrecy. Her eyes flickered with an almost mischievous excitement. "Emily! Madison! Perfect timing!" Mrs. Carla greeted, waving them closer. Emily furrowed her brow, noticing the odd atmosphere. "What's going on, Mrs. Carla?" "You'll see," Mrs. Carla replied with a grin, holding the door open. Inside, the usual tools and equipment were neatly stored away, leaving an open space. At the center of the room stood a table draped in a cloth, concealing something underneath. Emily glanced around, puzzled by the empty room. "What's this all about?" Emily asked, a note of apprehension in her voice. Before Mrs. Carla could answer, a familiar voice echoed from the doorway. "Just a moment." Emily turned to see Barron entering, a slim folder tucked under his arm, his eyes lit with determination. "Barron?" Emily's voice rose slightly in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Barron nodded in greeting and placed the folder on the table. Without responding, he moved toward the covered object and slowly lifted the cloth. Beneath it was a detailed miniature model of a restaurant, complete with tables, chairs, and a stove. "This is for you, Emily," Barron said, his voice steady yet filled with conviction. "It's an idea, a starting point." Emily stared at the model, her thoughts swirling. "I don't understand," she murmured. "You've proven you're capable, Emily," Barron explained. The dishes you've created and the care you've shown speak for themselves. It's time for you to take the next step." He gestured toward the model's sign, which read, "Golden Hearth." "I can't," Emily said, shaking her head and gripping the strap of her bag tightly. "I don't have the money or the skills for this." "You won't do it alone," Barron replied, his gaze unwavering. "I'll support you, bring in the right people, and even help find customers. All you need is to believe you're worthy of it." Madison stepped forward, her small hands gently touching the model. "Mom, you can do it," she said quietly, her voice firm. Emily looked at her daughter, then back at Barron. Emotions surged: astonishment, fear, and the faintest glimmer of hope. She wasn't sure she could believe in herself, but the idea of pursuing a dream no longer felt entirely out of reach. "I don't know if I can," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't need to know now," Barron reassured her. "Just try. The first step is all that matters." Emily's hands tightened into fists as she glanced between the model and the encouraging faces around her. Slowly, she nodded. Not from certainty, but because she couldn't keep running from the possibilities ahead. This might be the one chance to change everything. On the morning of the grand opening, soft sunlight streamed through the clear windows of Golden Hearth. Emily stood behind the counter, clutching her crisp white apron. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, mingling with the herbal scent of simmering soup. Her heart raced, not from anxiety, but from the excitement of a new beginning. Madison bustled around carrying a stack of menus she had colored and illustrated herself. Each page featured neat handwriting and cute drawings. "Mom, can I put the menus on the tables?" she asked eagerly, her eyes sparkling. "Sure, but place them neatly," Emily replied, her voice softer than usual. The restaurant door opened, and the first customers stepped inside, Mrs. Carla and a few students from Emily's cooking class. They smiled warmly, their encouragement evident. One woman paused at the counter looking at Emily. "I always knew you'd make it," she said. Emily smiled back, though her hands trembled slightly. "Thank you. I'm just doing my best." The room gradually filled with lively chatter, the scrape of chairs, and the mouth-watering aroma of food. Emily moved to the kitchen, her hands deftly preparing dishes. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging. Here, in this kitchen, at a corner table, Barron sipped black coffee, quietly observing. He watched Madison's radiant smile as she introduced the menus, and Emily's efficient rhythm as she delivered steaming plates of food. His expression reflected satisfaction. He had trusted the right person. Emily approached him, carrying a plate of lasagna, a dish she had perfected in class. "Here, try this," she said, setting the plate down. Barron looked at the food, then back at Emily. "It seems you've surpassed my expectations. If it weren't for you, I'd never have believed I could do this." Emily admitted, her voice sincere. Barron smiled faintly and cut a small bite. The creamy cheese and sweet tang of tomato sauce made him nod appreciatively. "It's excellent," he said. "You made this happen. You should be proud." Emily sat down, her gaze drifting to Madison, who was playing with children from the customers' families. "I think this is what she needed," she murmured more to herself. "A place she can call home." Barron didn't answer immediately. He studied her thoughtfully before saying, "And you deserve that too. This is only the beginning. You'll have more chances to grow." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with newfound hope. "I'll keep trying, not just for Madison, but for everyone who believes in me." As the evening settled, the last customers trickled out, leaving the space quiet. Madison sat at a table in the corner, coloring a new drawing. Emily stood in the middle of the kitchen, scanning the clean tables and gleaming utensils. Her heart felt full, as though all her years of struggle had finally found purpose. Barron stood by the door, preparing to leave. Emily walked over and called, "Thank you, Barron." "Truly." He turned with a smile. "No need to thank me, just pay it forward. Kindness should never stop." As the door closed behind him, Emily remained. This time, she didn't feel alone. Looking around the warm space, she knew this was where her and Madison's dreams would grow. Golden Hearth was more than a restaurant. It was a flame of hope she would keep alive. This story offers profound lessons for life. Emily's journey proves that even in the hardest circumstances, people can change if they dare to believe in themselves. Never lose hope, even when everything seems impossible. Barron Trump's selfless act shows that a small gesture from someone capable can entirely transform another's life. He not only helped Emily, but also gave her the chance to shape her own future. His actions highlight the power of kindness and its ability to inspire others to pay it forward. This story is a reminder that no matter how difficult life gets, with faith, kindness, and the right support, anyone can find their path to success. Each of us has the power to be a guiding light for someone else and make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. What do you think about Barron Trump's actions? Have you ever had someone help you overcome a tough situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this story to help spread its message. And if you want to hear more meaningful and heartfelt tales, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Each story is a lesson, and you can be part of a community that spreads positivity and hope to everyone. Let's light up the world and sow seeds of love together. Thank you for watching and supporting. See you in the next story.